I'm Rachel Horgan. Join me each episode as I sit down with a guest co-host covering the latest business stories in the Seattle area. We'll read the news so you don't have to. This is The Weekly. What is up, everyone? If you didn't catch it on the socials, I put all of last week's episode up on YouTube. So the whole video, you can see our pretty little faces, me and Coral. And it was really cool. We were in the studio at Madrona and we had 3 different camera angles. So one of me, one of her, and one of both of us. And I just feel like everything is figure outable. So I was really trying to figure out how to edit those 3 camera angles together. And I couldn't do it. And I know everyone is sitting there being like, Rachel, use AI. There's probably an AI software. I know. I tried it. And they all didn't do exactly what I wanted them to do. I think because there was sound in each one, so they couldn't identify who was speaking. There's a small chance it was my fault, but whatever. So I decided to do an age-old trick, which is throwing money at the problem. And I used Upwork. If you guys haven't used it, my friend used it. I've never used it. And I asked some random guy to do this for me. So it looks pretty good, and I encourage you to go check that out on YouTube. The other thing I wanted to say before we talk to my guest is what I'm calling Rachel's rant, because this week, actually, Listen, so last year, I think many of you know I was unemployed for a bit, and then I started my own freelance company. So I was unemployed and I got Apple Healthcare, or also known as Obamacare. And I was able to do that until the end of the year. They said, hey, you're making too much money. And I said, yeah, that checks out, that I'm going to have to pay for it, right? So I kind of ignored that towards the end of the year because I didn't want to deal with it. It sounded scary and I didn't want to pay all this money for health insurance. So come April, I was like, all right, it's time to be an adult and get on health insurance. I call Health Plan Finder, Washington Health Plan Finder, which the woman was very helpful to talk to. But did you know, maybe everybody knows this. You might know this, Joey. If you don't sign up for health insurance between November 1st and January 15th, you don't get it ever at all. No amount of money you can pay. And I knew that when I worked for an employer because you open enrollment, you sign up for it or whatever. But I just went and bought dental insurance. So I thought I could just buy health insurance. Anyway, I got really frustrated because the reason she was like, well, we have to keep organized and it's too hard and confusing. It's not her fault. She's talking about the whole US to sign up outside of, I'm sorry. We're turning pictures of dogs into humans and putting rich people into space. But I can't see the doctor in April because that's too confusing. Okay, that's the end of my rant. I'm going to get focused back onto the news because I'm sitting here with Joey Thompson, PR manager of meetings for Visit Seattle. Hello, Joey.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
Did you want to contribute to my healthcare rant?
I covered healthcare for about a year and a half at the Business Journal, and everything I learned was very confusing and very frustrating. Mm-hmm. And so I learned more about the inner workings of healthcare than I ever wanted to, and it's something that it's not good.
It's not good. It's I don't even know where to place my anger because I'm mad at so many different parts of it,
It's everything from the hospital to the insurance to the middle person between those two things, the billing department,
yes.
Each of them, and you're on the phone for hours, and it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah. I'm not a big crier, but I cried to this customer service woman. The poor woman was trying to help me and I was just sobbing. So anyway, I will say it's going to be fine, but I don't know. I think my current plan is to become religious and just convince God to keep me safe for a year. So anyway, back to Joey. So the reason I have you on, I know I mentioned you're with Visit Seattle, but you just started here and I'm bringing you on because you were formerly a reporter. You were a reporter for the Daily Herald of Everett. Then you were the retail and restaurant reporter at the Puget Sound Business Journal, which is where we met. And now you're here at this position. So we're going to be focusing more on kind of your journalistic side of things. And I know you covered, like I said, retail and restaurants a lot. So we're going to be talking about that in that episode. And then I'd love to have you back on maybe next year and you can kind of talk about your experience at Visit Seattle and what's going on here.
Sounds good.
Cool. So let's get to know you a little bit before we get into the news. Why did you get into journalism in the first place? And then why make this switch out of it?
So it's a very cliche answer, but it is the truth. And I saw all the President's Men at a very formative age. Oh. And thought that would be a really cool thing to do. So, and was always more inclined to reading, writing than anything with math or numbers or engineering or physics. So that was, and I like people's stories. It's interesting stuff. So that's what kind of got me into journalism. And the other one was I went to a city council meeting in Spokane, Washington as part of a journalism class. and loved every second of it.
You loved a city council meeting. I don't think you hear that a lot.
Everyone was so mad at our professor, and it got done, and I looked at him and was like, can I come back next week?
Wow.
And so that was like a real, like, oh, I'm kind of a weirdo.
Yeah.
But got into journalism and loved it. The change was, I think everybody who goes into being a reporter knows that at some point it's a very natural transition to go into PR. But I kind of always thought about that in the back burner. And then, in journalism, if you want to continue and you're like ambitious, you have to move a lot because that's just where other opportunities are. And that's kind of how you climb the journalism ladder. And I just really didn't want to move. Mm-hmm. So I was kind of thinking, what might be the next step? And if I was going to do something with PR, it had to be an organization or something that I felt really good about. Like I didn't want to just go and do a corporate PR gig. And so funny enough, I saw this opportunity and I thought, well, I don't want to move. I love living here. Wouldn't it be great to do something PR-y about living here and coming here? So it seemed like a good fit. And I had worked very closely with the PR team at Visit Seattle as a reporter. So it was a rare combination of, this is something I feel really good about, and I also kind of know the team already and feel like it would be a good fit. I told them during the interview process, I feel like this is kind of a trial on my personality, if you like me or not, because you know my work and you know me.
That's true, yeah.
And apparently they do, so it's going well.
Yeah, I love that. Well, you mentioned PR, and I asked Coral this in the last episode because she made a similar switch. But what do you think makes for a good PR release? And kind of, when we've got people out there that there's new things happening in their businesses and they want to get an article picked up by PSBJ, they want to get an article picked up by somebody else. What do you look for in a PR release, and what advice do you have for people?
I think the main thing is knowing your audience and what your audience wants. At the Business Journal, you'd get a lot of press releases that would also be sent to the Seattle Times or to Eater or the Daily Journal of Commerce. And those are all very different papers that cover different things. So you have to kind of know the angle of if you want coverage, you have to know who you're pitching to and what they want from you. So, the release doesn't have to be different, but maybe the pitch email of saying, hey, for the Business Journal, we're hiring. So here's how much we're going to hire. That's in the press release. And for the Times, it's, oh, look at this cool thing we're doing for our employees if we raise a bunch of money. Mm-hmm. So knowing the audience is as important as what you're putting in the release.
Yeah, good advice. All right. I did a similar thing as last week where I crammed a bunch of stories into this episode. And there's kind of 5 segments, if you will. The first one is going to be restaurant updates, again, because you have a long history there. The second one is going to be kind of sports updates here in Seattle. Then we'll talk about the Pike Place banning cars. And fourth, we'll talk about crosswalk buttons being hacked. You might have seen this on TikTok. And last, we'll talk about the Everett Herald moving locations, which is your former employer. Former
very,
employer.
Very full circle moment today.
I know. Look at that. All right. So here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. I think we have 4 restaurant updates. And I'll start with the first one, which is Salt and Straw. This is a Portland-based company, ice cream. I haven't been there, so I'm not sure entirely what they offer. You probably have. Portland-based, and it was founded by cousins. There's going to be 2 new locations. That's what the news article is about. 2 new locations by the end of the year. And one is the space across from Pike Place Market that used to be a Starbucks. The second one is going to be near the Redmond Light Rail. And I think worth mentioning, there's one up by my house in Queen Anne that's going to be opening up this year. So they are expanding rapidly in Seattle. So, Joey, any thoughts on this? I know you've covered them quite a bit.
Yeah, the downtown location is so interesting. Everybody was shocked when Starbucks closed the First and Pike location and wondered what could possibly be next. When I was with PSBJ, another reporter, and I went and had this sort of, hour-long briefing with the mayor to ask a bunch of different questions. And one of the things we talked about was, what does it say about Seattle if your corporate, one of your hometown corporations has to close, downtown? And he sort of said, well, let's see if anybody else can handle that spot, because they believe in Pike Place Market as this incredible draw, and Seattle's making waves, and let's see what happens. And it's only been a handful of months and we see Salt and Straw ready to go. So I know a lot of people are going to be watching to see how successful that is. And I'm sure it's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah. And to be clear, it's not in Pike Place, because there is the quote first Starbucks in Pike Place. This is right across the street, just to clarify.
First and Pike.
So they'll get a lot of that traffic though. Okay, so Raising Cane's, you want to tell me about that update?
Yeah, Raising Cane's. When I was at the Business Journal, I think I've written enough fried chicken stories to last a lifetime. People love Raising Cane's, and so I'm glad that in my stead, they have followed up on the reporting and are continuing on. They finally filed plans for a Linwood location on 164th Street. That's joining ones that are going to be at U District, Covington, Silverdale. There was going to be a Renton one, but they decided not to. We don't have opening dates for any of them. The U District one, I think, is going to be first. That's kind of what they had always said, hoping for late spring. It's spring now. We don't know, but people are very excited. It's going to be a very popular spot.
Is it U District or Seattle U?
U District. So it's going to be on... Really? Where the old American Apparel was in the U District. Yeah, it's going to be insane.
Wow, okay. You covered most of it. The only other thing I had was that it's a Baton Rouge, Louisiana-based chain, and they have over 800 restaurants in 41 states.
The expats in Seattle have been waiting for Raising Cane's.
Yeah, it has a big following, I know. All right, our next one is about Eden Hill. So Eden Hill is closing, and they're closing after 10 years. They cited in the article not necessarily one thing is making them close. Of course, the pandemic, tightening nature of restaurant economics, owners getting older. They mentioned a few different things. One thing that stuck out to me in the article was this quote about kind of how hard it is to make money in restaurants. It was a fun puzzle and now simmers resentment that bleeds into our hospitality. It's hard to feel generous when we're feeling so strapped. And I really thought that makes sense because you want to feel like you can give them a free ice cream or comp their meal. And if you have this mindset of like, we're struggling, like you're not going to go that extra mile to give them a free glass of champagne or whatever, I would guess. So what stood out to you in that Eden Hill one?
I think the same thing. It's just everything that I've ever heard from people in restaurants in Seattle is how hard it is. And it's not just a Seattle thing, but it's hard. It takes all of your time. I mean, if you can't afford a major, huge staff, you're spending all the time at the restaurant. And I think for a lot of people, that's the allure early on. But yeah, when you've gone a decade or so and you still don't have that staff that can come in and you can kind of take a more not day-to-day approach, it's really hard. And the margins, no one gets into it to make a bunch of money. They do it because they love to do it. But when you're getting pulled every which way and the margins are getting worse and worse, it sucks. Yeah,
and they're saying that, they can't devote 14 to 16 hours a day every day anymore. And I don't know if they're raising a family or not, but that probably comes into play. All right, the last restaurant update is Rapport. So formerly, way back in the day, when I used to live in Capitol Hill, it was Roy Street Coffee, which I don't know if people know this, but it was actually owned by Starbucks. So some people thought they were supporting like a local coffee shop, but actually it was Starbucks. But it was a really cute spot. And then this company restaurant bar called Rapport comes in, and that's where you can self-serve glasses of wine, try different ones. We covered this in a different episode. Anyway, they shut down, I think around January, and now Nomadic Wine Dispensary. I'm not sure how I feel about the name, but there's first-time hospitality entrepreneurs. It sounded like, from the article, these tech workers that live in Capitol Hill and really didn't want to see this go away. So they're coming in and they're hoping to open end of April. I don't know. It is end of April, so I'm not sure if that's still going to be true. We'll keep an eye on it. And they're focusing on early evenings and night hours, not quite ready for coffee. I think they're just going to focus on one thing at a time. Have you been down there?
No, but it's, I think, kind of following up on what we just talked about. It's a great story of people not doing this because it's this, awesome investment, but hey, we want this thing to continue to exist. We'll step up and do it. I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah. So we covered a lot of different restaurant articles, and you spent a good amount of time interviewing a lot of different owners. What did you kind of hear from most owners, and what do you think needs to change?
Yeah, so much of the restaurant stuff in Seattle lately has been like minimum wage based. And I think Ethan Stolz kind of says it best of like, it's a bad PR problem. Why every time someone sees a restaurant owner talking about an issue, it's always about wages. Mm-hmm. And that doesn't exactly create a lot of goodwill with the community. But, restaurant people aren't doing it to make boatloads of money. It's all about because they love hospitality. And it's true. I mean, you wouldn't do it if it was this, there's a reason that you don't see a bunch of private equity firms investing in restaurants. They're not good investments, but they're good for the community. So I think what I always tried to do was meet the people behind restaurants and then trying to understand it's not just, this business owner wants to make more money. It's this person's trying to keep this community asset, amenity alive, like the folks on Capitol Hill are doing.
Yeah.
And it is tough. It's a lot of time. The margins are getting worse and worse for a variety of different reasons. And at the same time, you have to kind of position yourself as, no, we are advocates for wages and growth and a livable city. So it's just, there's a lot, hats off to anybody who can continue to run a restaurant, because it's brutal.
I agree. Do you feel like in your time towards the end, I had a friend that was trying to keep a tally of all the restaurants that were closing. Yeah. And the last time she had it, we were, I think, past 2020, the amount of restaurants that have closed. I haven't compared that to new opening ones, but were you noticing that we were closing? I mean, we've covered a lot of restaurant closures on this episode, on the show.
But I will say, with every closure, there are a ton of openings because people have that kind of
new idea.
There's that draw of hospitality, and you see it. People in tech want to go and do this. People leave certain careers to go in hospitality, where they're there their entire career. And one thing that I always thought was interesting, doing another name drop deal, was I was interviewing Tom Douglas, famed Seattle restaurant person, and I was asking him about restaurants that have closed, and he says, I don't get romantic about restaurants closing. Sometimes it's their run. The run isn't going to be forever. Each restaurant isn't going to stick around forever. They have a span, and whether it's long or short, it is what it is. You move on to the next one. So I thought that was fascinating to hear from him.
Yeah.
That it's not like, oh, I'm so tied to fighting to keep this thing alive, as, okay, I'll just go do another one.
Yeah. I don't know if it's the same, but I feel that way about TV shows sometimes, where I'm like, it's okay that they don't have another season. Like, they had their time, and it was good. Okay, moving on to sports updates. We have, again, a slew of sports updates. Two things here with Kraken. First off, Kraken fires head coach Dan Blisma after one season. I will say they say just after one season, but how many games are in one season? I do feel like that's a lot of chances to win. But anyway, they missed out on the NHL playoffs. They ended 7th place out of 8. And he actually took the job last year after they fired Dave Haxtell. So kind of a revolving door of coaches over here at the Kraken. I also want to mention, since we're talking about Kraken coaches, Jessica Campbell. If you're not familiar with her, she's the first woman in the coaching staff for the NHL. And she grew up playing hockey with the boys in Canada. Her older brother played, and he was tragically killed in a car accident. So she wore his jersey all throughout the year. She continued to play, win awards, and then obviously now is coaching. And she's kind of a Seattle, famous person here. Have you met her or talked to her?
No, but I did see she's staying on staff, which is great.
I know. I got nervous. I was like, all these firings, like, you better not take my girl. All right. There's another change to the Kraken season tickets. Joey, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, they are trying to make it more affordable to be a Kraken fan, which I think everybody can appreciate. You're seeing that with a lot of sports teams, kind of understanding that stuff's expensive, and you want everyone to be able to go. I know the Mariners did some stuff earlier, and Kraken now, more you can do season tickets annually now. You don't have to lock yourself in to like 3 years. They have more discounts inside the arena for when you're there. So just a lot of ways around the edges to make it a little more accessible for everybody to go to a Kraken game, because they're really fun to go to. Mm-hmm. So as long as you open up the coalition, help build, it's still a new team too, and build the fan base and all that stuff. So cool to see them taking some steps to make it more accessible.
I think it's a great marketing move. You've got people that have already spent a bunch of money, a 3-year deal, and to give back and say thank you. I don't know if monetarily they needed to give these discounts out to the season ticket holders, but I think it's a smart move. Moving into the Storm. Storm has some new media deals. So if you haven't heard this already, I don't know where you've been, but the WNBA is blowing up. So they already have some deals that WNBA does, but the Storm specifically announced a deal that they will be locally broadcasting with an ABC affiliate, Como TV, and a CW affiliate, KUNS TV. KUNS will broadcast about 33 games this season that aren't nationally televised, and Como will do about 13. Then you, of course, can watch on like Hulu Live and all that. One fun fact about the WNBA I found in this article is that the WNBA total attendance last year was up 48% from 2023. That is a huge increase year over year in attendance. Any thoughts on this new media deal?
I think it's so cool. Well, one, knowing how Storm attendance has always been among the highest in the league, and now they have this deal. We're getting another women's sports-centric sports bar in Seattle up on Capitol Hill. It's great to see that Seattle is kind of one of those leading cities when it comes to the massively growing tent of all women's sports. And so, yeah, no, it's sweet.
Yeah.
And the fact that you couldn't watch all these games on TV before. I mean, come on.
I know. That's the thing is they're like, no one watches it. I'm like, well, we can't, like, unless we buy this random thing to watch it. Next one is Marshawn Lynch. Joey, why don't you take that one?
Yeah, he is joining the ownership of another Seattle sports team. He's going into the rugby world with the Seawolves.
That's right.
And our old colleague, Rick Morgan, with an incredible story on celebrities getting into sports ownership. He's been doing a great job covering sports. I just think Marshawn has really embraced being a Seattle person.
He's also part owner of Kraken. So,
and let's, women's sports having a moment. Can rugby have a moment?
That's our new headline. Can rugby have a moment? I do think they're growing. I don't know. I'd have to look into the numbers. You probably could look at the numbers with Visit Seattle.
Yeah, I'll have to do that.
Yeah, we'll report back. All right. I'm going to move into our next story. This one is about Pike Place banning cars in a test run. So we covered this with the Emily Cantrell episode, how they were talking about doing this, and now they're actually doing it. The part of the reason is that it is tied to work being done by the Seattle Public Utilities. So I don't know what they're doing with the streets, but they're doing some sort of work, and so they have to close it anyway. But still allowed are going to be emergency vehicles, drivers with disabled parking permits, commercial deliveries, vendor loading and unloading. Those all make sense to me. And then they are still allowing curbside pickup for customers who placed orders. Who's placing curbside? Maybe you have a reason, but if you don't need to be driving into Pike Place, I don't recommend it. It's like an anxiety attack waiting to happen. They are trying to learn as much as they can before the World Cup, obviously coming in 2026. This will last through the summer, and I'm excited about it. I don't understand why we wouldn't do this, but there's 200 commercial tenants in Pike Place, 500 craftspeople, and 450 residents. So this is going to impact quite a few people. Yeah. Joe?
Yeah. Well, I mentioned it earlier. A huge shout out to Mark Stiles because we met with the mayor several months ago, and he prodded until he kind of relented and said, "Yeah, we have an idea. Maybe it's retractable bollards, but we have." And so I think PSBJ was the first to report on that, and the idea that the mayor was very interested in doing something, because we've been talking about this forever. I mean, people have always asked the question, why are there cars there? And there are real reasons why vendors need to get in and out, suppliers and all that good stuff.
Sure.
And so this seems like a cool way to pilot an idea of, hey, we're going to be shutting down anyway. The mayor is clearly very interested in seeing how this goes. And he's shown that if he's interested in something, it's probably going to happen. So I think it's exciting. I like the idea of retractable bollards going up and down.
What does that mean?
So bollards, those big cylinders that
stop,
they go into the ground for certain hours of the day when the suppliers need to get in and out. And then as soon as they're done, they go back up. So private traffic can't come into the street. So super cool idea. You see them in Europe a lot. Why not Pike Place Market? So it's, super exciting.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited about it too. Anything you think people should know about Pike Place from your time kind of covering some of the restaurants over there?
It's so cool. And I know,
you are at the right company.
I know it's my job to say that, but when I was at PSBJ and we'd be downtown 4 days a week, it's such a cool place to walk and get lunch.
Yeah.
And there's so many places. Shout out Michu. That's probably my favorite right now. Nice deli for sandwiches. The $10 lunch is alive in Seattle. It's at Michu. But I love it. And it's like great, it is cool also to see tourists there and stuff and be like, I get to go here every day.
I do think that it's nice to see your city through somebody else's eyes.
Totally.
When somebody else visits. They're like, whoa, this is cool. You're like, it is cool. Yeah.
And I grew up in Everett, so it was always like, go do all the touristy things. And then working downtown, I was like, no, it is really cool to have this here.
I know. My fun fact about Pike Place, I think I've said it before, but you have to be, if you want your business to be in Pike Place, it has to be the very first location of that business. So you can't have opened up somewhere else and then want to open a second location in Pike Place, which I thought was really interesting. All right, moving right along, we are going to talk about, speaking of, walking and crosswalk buttons hacked. This is kind of a silly one I saw on TikTok, and GeekWire picked up an article about this. But basically, there's AI-enabled versions of when you go and hit the crosswalk button, it says like walk or like wait, like it kind of talks to you. Somebody came in and hacked those, and some of them are in the voice of Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, and some are in the voice of Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg, and some are Elon Musk. And I'll read like an example. The Mark Zuckerberg one, like when you hit it, it says, "It's normal to feel uncomfortable or even violated as we forcefully insert AI into every facet of your conscious experience. I just want to assure you, you don't need to worry because there's absolutely nothing you can do to stop it." So it's kind of not silly, but joking about how serious some of this stuff is. And they're calling it hacktivism, where you kind of hack into things for activism. Have you covered any stories about hacktivism?
I've never seen anything like this. And I'll be honest, my like stick in the mud reaction to this was, hey, people need crosswalk signs and notifications like that. I get it. You want to have fun, but like people need to cross the street. I
know. I was like, was there somebody vision impaired that was hopefully not so confused? But I think I admire the creativity of activism, and I hope that it didn't cause any harm. Anything else on this one?
No.
All right. Last one is the Everett Herald moves to a smaller location. This one I'm going to hand over to you because this is your former employer.
Yeah.
Tell me what happened.
So I will say, as a former employee of the Herald, the office was too large.
Oh, okay.
It was but again, a sign of a bygone era of print media where it made sense to have an office that big. But no, I mean, it's been a rough few years for the Herald. They've had big layoffs. They got sold again. Now, it is cool that they're going more in downtown Everett to have their office, which is where they should be, downtown. But it's a bummer. It's a smaller office, and they have a much smaller staff than they used to. So you hate to see it.
Yeah. That's a bummer. Well, weren't they just bought by somebody?
Yeah, an Alabama-based media group bought Sound Publishing's parent company not too long ago.
What are your thoughts on journalism as a whole and kind of where we're going? Do you see that we're not doing well?
I think it's a requirement for a lot more creative funding, and you see that with the Times a lot. They have a lot of cool foundations and such helping them with revenue. And that's just become super important because the digital ads and the print ads just aren't
not cutting it
anymore. So they got to get creative. And it's tough for a city like Everett, which is a big city in Washington, that, their paper of record is paring down.
Yeah. All right. Well, Joey, I'm going to close us out here. And I want to ask, what gives you hope, and kind of how do you stay motivated? Like when you need to get motivated for work. And yeah, I need both of these things right now. I need hope and motivation. The
hope thing is, and it can sound selfish, but it's like you just look around at the things we're so inundated with the news of the world that it can be very helpful to just take stock of your personal world and the things you enjoy from that, whether it's, people or activities or places, and leaning as heavily on those as you possibly can without, trauma dumping to a friend at a bar. And then hope is, I'm a true believer that, through history, we see the pendulums swing back and forth through all facets of economics and politics and everything. And so, as they say with every "it's so over" comes a "we're so back."
Yeah. Oh, I like that. I've not heard that. That's true.
As cringy as that is to say.
Yeah. I think a lot of us are like, how wide is this pendulum, though? Yeah. Right. But no, I've definitely said that before as well. I like that. All right. Well, thanks for sitting down with me. Thanks for hosting me here at your new office. And again, we'll have to check back in with you later when you get a little more settled.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
This has been The Weekly, with production assistance from Nick Patry. If you liked what you heard, rate us and write a review on Apple Podcast or Spotify. We love listener feedback, so if you have any story suggestions, comments, or complaints, email us at info@theweeklyseattle.com. Make sure to check back next Sunday for the latest local business news. We'll see you next time.